Hi, Alan Stratton from Woodturn. When I was growing up, my mother would frequently serve us hash. We continued that tradition in our family with our children. What is hash? Hash is taking all the leftovers out of the fridge, mixing them up a different way, maybe adding a little bit, something new, and serving it again. Reusing your leftovers, if you will. Well, now I'm wood turning, and the same thing applies. I've got all these leftover segmented rings that I don't know what to do with, so I'm going to take them out of my fridge and turn them into another meal. This will be a segmented bowl made out of scrap. It is lopsided, a little bit weird, if you will. And the new element that I'll add on this one is a carved base. Almost out of necessity, but I'll explain that later. But for now, let's make our wood turn hash.
I'm using a threaded wood faceplate to which I've already added the first segmented ring from my leftover pile. This ring is cherry with 12 segments. I've also added a piece of solid pine before the segment ring. I used the usual yellow glue for both of these pieces of wood. Now I'm adding a 24 segment ring of oak. I don't remember which projects these came from. Normally I would not randomly mix rings of different numbers of segments, but this is segmented hash after all. For this and all following rings, I'm using Titebond Original Extend, as I believe it gives me a more stable and sandable glue line. For now, I can use weights for clamping pressure, but that's going to change soon. Meanwhile, I glued a walnut cross-grain plug into the bottom. Next, I'll glue on an 8-segment ring from walnut. This ring and the remaining rings are all leftovers from my Crazy Droopy segmented bowl. It already has a slant in the ring. I used one clamp to position it and weights for overall clamping pressure. However, the lopsidedness is starting to take its toll. All of the weights slid off onto the floor and had to be replaced. Now for a trip to the lathe. For now, all I want to do is to trim the outer perimeter to be round. I don't want to reduce the diameter, as I need as much wood as possible to clamp the next rings. I know that I'm pushing the glue set time. It had an hour, which is enough to turn just a little under light pressure. However, some of the excess squeeze out is still fluid and spins out with centrifugal force. But no worries. The next ring is an 8-segment ring of padauk, also on a slant. Now the clamping is getting more difficult, but I managed to get the clamps to apply enough pressure. I thought that after the last experience with the Crazy Droopy segmented bowl, that one ring at a time would go easier. True, but still messy. Next, to the lathe to again trim the outer perimeter. One of the challenges for this bowl is starting to show up. Since I'm lining up the thin sides of the rings, trimming the perimeter is seeming like a multi-axis turning. There's a lot of air on the short side of the bowl as it comes around. Fortunately, the ghost image gives me a clue as to where the wood is. Next, an 8-segment ring of oak, again aligning the thin side but still with a little offset so that the glue joints don't line up. Clamping is getting even more weird. Back to the lathe for a trim. This time there will be a change in ring diameter for the next ring. It's really hard for me to visualize the shape and how to optimize the ring placement, so this time I'll clean out the inside before it gets too deep. Now the challenge changes to be like that of a natural edge bowl, since the entry point for my gouge is oscillating forward and back as the wood revolves. The fact that the wood is dry and hard makes it tough going. I don't go all the way in right now, but only the minimum to smooth out the inside. Since I cannot visualize the project very well, I need all the wood that I can get to be able to shape the bowl later on. Now to glue on an 8-segment ring of walnut. This one is a larger diameter, which is why I needed to keep as much wood as possible in the previous step. If I thought clamping was tough before, it is even worse now. Now to trim up that last ring. Originally, I had planned to add several more rings to the bowl, but as I started trimming this last ring, I realized that the wood was getting very thin and that continuing with more rings would likely be more of a problem. Even with what I had, this was becoming very difficult to turn. So I adapted my plan to end with this ring. With this adaptation, I continued to shape the bowl, alternating between the interior and exterior to get a shape that is pleasing. Then a whole lot of sanding. I had to sand with the lathe stopped, which is especially difficult for the interior, but I'll spare you the sanding. Next I'll part it off, but that's not the end of my problem. Normally I'd reverse mount the bowl to adjust the foot, but with an uneven bowl that is not an option. So now for the foot. Not possible to use the lathe unless maybe as a vacuum chuck, but I think this bowl is an excellent candidate for carving the foot. Last weekend, at the New Oregon Woodturning Symposium, I saw Trent Bosch do some carving on a vessel. I don't have all his tools, so I'll make do with what I have. I'll start with a Proxxon tool with a cutter. I've marked off the 3 lines to indicate the areas I want to leave as feet. For this, 3 feet is better than 4, since it will never rock. Gently, I'm removing wood between them. This feels a lot like using 5 grit sandpaper. Next I'll switch to a small flap sander to smooth out the deep gouge cuts and do some more shaping. For the final smoothing, I'll move over to the drill press. I've mounted a small sanding pad. Now starting with 60 grit, I can smooth it more. With 80 grit the shape is complete, and the rest of sanding is to eliminate any remaining scratches. To me, the advantages of sanding with the drill press include that I don't have to hold a heavy, unstable sander, and that I'm constantly feeling the project, its shape and smoothness with my fingers. I'm using a Dremel engraver to sign and date the project before going over the engraving with 400 grit sandpaper to deburr the area. Then I'll dump it into walnut oil for a short bath as a finish. This project adapted as it came together. It combines aspects of off-axis turning, natural edge turning, segmented turning, and carving. I think the 3 feet make for an interesting and very different base than a traditional foot. Maybe I'm crazy, but this little bowl was fun, even when it was scary. Maybe I'll do another batch of segmented hash again. That's all the fun for now. Until next week for another project. Please subscribe to both my website and YouTube channel. Do yourself a favor and always wear your face shield. Goggles are not enough. Until next time, this is Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns.